If money was no object, what would be the best TV that you can buy in 2024? Let's talk about it. All right, welcome everyone to Techno Gamer back here. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm really imploring you guys. I'm really close to 1,000 subscribers. So please like, subscribe. Don't, some comments at me. I usually am really good at responding. I look at everything. So please do that. Please do that. Let's get to 1,000 really soon here. Now, this is just a thought exercise that, I've been kind of going throughout the year, looking at the TV markets. Now, I did a video previously. I'll put it here. Where I just kind of talked about at a high level, some of the latest activity with TVs. The TV market is really interesting to me because it's one of those areas in the whole home theater, aspect where it changes a lot, and there really is no just like best solution. The purpose of my channel of Journey to Endgame, TV is one of those areas where I've consistently said Endgame doesn't exist because, it's not just about any one thing. It's not just about image quality. It's not just about the feature set. And the feature set changes so much. Sizes change. I mean, if you look at TVs today in 2024 versus even 2020 or 5 years ago, 2019 especially, it's completely different. QD-OLED exists now. That wasn't a thing. Micro LEDs are technically on the market, even though they're still way out there in terms of the cost. Mini LED wasn't a thing 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So that, pushes things, and then the size has changed. Now we have 100+ inch TVs that are accessible and plenty of options for TVs that are 100 inches that are actually affordable. Whereas 4 or 5 years ago, these TVs would have easily been well into the 5 figures at the minimum, so things changed a lot. We have HDMI 2.1 spec. 4 or 5 years ago, we were at HDMI 2.0, whatever it was, right? I mean, so this stuff changes. We'll be at HDMI 2.2 or 3.0 that will require some things if you really want to stay cutting edge for, watching content and playing games or whatever it is, right? Image quality technologies are constantly evolving as well. So it's an interesting place to think about. But with the technology, with the options that are available today, what would be the best option if money were no object? Take money out of it. Have an open wallet, and you can get any TV you can get. What would that look like? Now, I've been kind of thinking about that throughout the year, looking at the options that are available today, and I think I have a pretty clear answer. And I want to talk to you guys about my thought process and my reasoning for that, and you guys tell me if you agree or, what are your considerations are for you. Again, there is no smoking gun. There is no just ultimate perfect answer for TVs. It really depends on your use case. Are you in a bright room? Are you in a dark room? Are you, do you have the size? Is this like in a dedicated home theater space? Is it for your bedroom? I mean, there's a lot of just considerations that can definitely play into which TV is best for you. So this isn't like get this TV or else, but I'm just going to break down my thought process and thinking about how to evaluate TVs to really get the best overall option I feel like there is out there. Now, the first thing to think about is, what are the real criteria? What are the real categories that to me matter when you think about evaluating a TV, period? Okay. And I'm gonna kind of group them into 3 high-level categories, or 3 high-level factors. All right. The first is, of course, image quality. And that's a loaded thing. What the image quality entails a lot of different things, but I'm just going to group that in. So image quality. What's the best image quality you can get, right? The second thing is size. Size matters. So the general rule of thumb is get the biggest TV that your budget will allow, right? And in many cases, most people will prefer a larger TV with slightly lower image quality than a better image quality TV that's smaller. Think about that. So size definitely matters. And then the third thing is, I'm just going to say the feature set. Now, most TVs today, especially those that are kind of at the flagship level, pretty much are loaded with everything. Gaming features, 144 hertz, low input lag, HDMI 2.1, Dolby Vision, blah, 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 blah. I mean, list goes on. Most TVs are pretty much on par with that. But when you start looking at the TVs and trying to just differentiate them, some of them do have some things that may be missing that's worth considering, right? Now, the fourth thing here, of course, would be price. But like I said, we're going to take price out of it for the sake of this exercise. But of course, that would be a consideration. So now let me look at those different components. Let me start with size. Size is really interesting today. Today, right, and I'm recording this video in November 2024. We're kind of about to head into the new TV year, actually, of 2025, right? Starting with CES in January. Size is changed dramatically because what's now affordable in terms of the biggest thing that you can get, it has completely changed. Now, 100 inches is kind of like the new 85, right? If that makes sense, right? Like, so what was like when 85, even just 4 or 5 years ago, 85 inches was like, wow, right? That's just humongous. There were some 98 inches and 100 inch TVs that existed in the world technically, but they were just so outrageous again that no one thought about them. All right. I mean, they again all were starting well into the 5 figures, most cases well over 20 grand if you wanted to look at a 98, 100 inch. In fact, Sony actually had a TV, I want to say around 2018, 2019, where it was like $50,000 or $60,000 for their 100 inch. It was something crazy, right? Nowadays in 2024, you can get a 98 inch TV. You can get a 100 inch TV for less than $2,000. Like, real talk. It's crazy. 100 inches is generally about as large as you can get. Now, technically, there are a couple of TVs that are bigger than 100 inches today. And it's really just 2 TVs. So one is the Hisense UX, which they have their flagship is 110 inches. And the other, of course, is their partner in crime, TCL, makes a 115 inch TV. These are the biggest TVs that money can buy. These are the biggest TVs in the world today. TVs. Now, of course, you can go projector and you can go way bigger than that technically, via projectors. But that says something, right? That you can get a TV for 115 inches or 110 inches or many, many options at the 100 inch level. Again, that would have been unheard of, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now we're encroaching into projector territory, right? Now you can get a TV at projector sizes. And generally speaking, TVs may be a better option, but we'll get into that. Keep in mind that now Walmart, actually builds and makes and sells a 98 inch TV. Again, for I think it's around $2,000. I mean, this is crazy. And you still can go up to over $30,000 at the high end for even 100 inch level. So it's a wide range, but there are a lot of options there. So that's kind of the new hotness, right? 85 is kind of old news at this point, right? Now, let's get into that discussion more about projectors versus TV. So I've had this conversation with some folks in person and on forums. I've really been digging into this, really been around throughout this year. And a lot of people say, well, why would you even just spend the money, especially the high-end stuff? So, when we talk about some of the high-end options for TVs at 100 inches plus, they're generally over 10 grand, right, for sure. And it's like, why would you spend that much? If you're going to spend that much, just get a projector and whatever. Well, for me personally, I've never really been into projectors. They can be great. You can get a big screen. But, there are some obvious downsides, right, compared to TVs. So for one, TV's generally going to get brighter. You got to pay a lot of money. You're paying 5 figures for a projector to even come close to the brightness levels that even a mid-range TV can get to, right? So that's why projectors are usually recommended and made for low light rooms, where a light controlled room, a dedicated home theater where you can turn the lights off and keep it dim, because they don't do well when you have ambient light and light shining on them, right? And that's part of the reason. So you can get a lot more brightness in general. You can get a lot more contrast, which is more pleasing. Is honestly just a better image quality from a TV, especially a high-end TV. And again, you can put TVs in more places, with the light, it being able to handle more ambient lighting. The other thing, and probably the biggest thing for me, is that projectors are just a lot more difficult to integrate, right? obviously there's two parts to the projector. There's the projector itself, and then there is the screen, separate components. But the projector, integrating the projector properly will require, probably someone to come out and do so, or maybe you can try to do it yourself, but some level of construction to get the projector mounted to, usually to your ceiling, or get it enclosed in some kind of a box or something. They generally, are a lot more noisy. They have loud fans. They generate a lot more heat, so in general, again, you don't put a projector in a rec room or, kind of like a family room, living room environment in general. Again, you want that in a dedicated space that you can control that kind of stuff, the noise, the heat, all that kind of stuff. And then it's just harder to set up and just get dialed in right. TV, you buy it, everything's there, you put it on your wall, put it on the stand, you're done, right? That's not how projectors work. And in my space, and a lot of spaces I've had, I just wasn't willing to do all of that work for a projector. I just didn't see the value for it. The other thing though is that TVs are going to be better for one of my biggest use cases, which is gaming in general. Now, there are some projectors as of late that are starting to get better with HDMI 2.1 support. The input latency, generally speaking, for projectors were a lot worse. So if you wanted to get out the best gaming experience, you wasn't going to go projectors. Projectors was more about movie watching, right? Large format movie watching. That's somewhat changing. Projectors are getting better, but again, by the time you start paying for those, a lot of projectors today are still not even really true 4K, to be honest. You can get a 4K TV today for $200, right? But a lot of projectors still aren't. When you get to true 1-to-1 pixel mapping for 4K, you're spending a pretty penny on those projectors. And if you want to go beyond that, for 8K or something, I mean, you're way out in the weeds, right? 5-figure level. And even again, to get certain brightness, to get the ones that have the better features and better gaming support, for example, whatever, you're going to be paying a pretty penny for it. So apples to apples, TVs are a better value, right? The biggest limitation with TVs has been the size, right? Like TVs by and large were limited to 65, then 75, whereas you can go 100 plus inch at the time for projector for even roughly the same price or similar price, right? So that's something to think about. Now, when you think about the quality, that second factor, right? One of the first things that comes to mind is just the whole debate of OLED versus LED, right? What's the best image quality you can get on the market today? Now, both have their pros and cons, and I want to preface this by saying I absolutely prefer OLED, right? When it comes down to my taste in terms of what I can get for the best image quality, OLED all day for sure. That said, I can attest that I have 4 TVs in my house right now today, and 3 of the 4 TVs are LEDs. Okay, why? Use case. Use case matters, of course. And LEDs definitely have their purpose, right? For the most part, they're going to give you a great picture. They're going to be good enough or close enough to OLED, especially for the later, newer mini LED stuff. But, for my family room, which is a light-soaked room, has a lot of ambient light, one of the biggest advantages of LEDs that they can get brighter than OLED, especially full screen brightness, which is good for like SDR and like watching sports and hockey and stuff like that. LEDs are king. They're usually still about twice as bright as even the best OLEDs for full screen, especially. Now the HDR highlights, peak brightness usually for many LEDs can also get brighter, but in practice for real content, they're getting pretty close. It would be hard pressed to notice that in a lot of cases. But they could get brighter. In terms of size per dollar, LED all day, right? I mean, if you wanted to get a bigger TV, even 85 inch and obviously 98 inch and 100 inch or bigger, LED all day in terms of being able to get that for the lowest cost, no question. 83 inch OLED, is still running, somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000, especially for the high end stuff. I mean, whereas you can get an 83 inch mini LED TV for literally half that price, so that's something to consider for sure. Now, in terms of just raw image quality, like I said, OLED all day. LEDs, no matter how many dimming zones they want to have and how many nits they want to tout for their brightness, they simply can never match an OLED for that pixel level dimming control. That gives you not just better contrast, it's what's called micro contrast. At the individual pixel level, there's just certain shades of color that you just can't mimic with a LED of any kind. It's just a fundamental thing about the technology. So if contrast is something that matters to you, as it does to me and a lot of people clearly, and I've already went over this in my video, I've shown you guys like just how dominant in terms of the reviewers and the actual like TV reviewers and the media outlets. When it comes to just pure quality, if you ask somebody, okay, what's the best image quality? It's OLED. All right. I mean, it's hard. I haven't heard anyone really make a argument to try to say that LED has a better picture than OLED. That's never really the point. It may be brighter. It may be better for certain use cases. It may be better for certain people for gaming or something like that. But overall, if you want to get the most accurate, most realistic looking images, it's OLED all day, every day. So with that said, thinking about the best TV money can buy, for image quality, I got to be looking at OLED, right? And for size, I'm looking at something that's bigger than 85 inches, right? You get to you see where I'm going here. Now, the other thing to think about when it turns about the best picture quality that you can get is what type of OLED. All right, I talked about this before in my other video, but there are technically two primary types of OLED TVs that are on the market today. You have QD-OLED, which is quantum dot OLED, that's made by Samsung Electronics, and you have what's called WRGB OLED or WOLED, some people call it, which is made by LG. Now, WOLED is the OLED TVs that we have heard about. It was the only OLED on the market for roughly 9 years or so. Initially, it debuted back in 2013, and LG was the primary manufacturer, but it's eventually spilled out to other brands. But that was the only kind of underlying technology when we thought of OLED. Now, just in 2022, Samsung Electronics has introduced QD-OLED, which basically adds a quantum dot layer on top of the OLED panel, and the result is a lot better color brightness, or what's called color volume. In other words, colors can look richer and brighter to make the image pop a bit more. That's the advantage of QD-OLED. Now, when you break this down, this gets into some tricky territory for me, because a lot of people, out there, especially the TV enthusiast crowd, are acting like QD-OLED is just a savior, and it's the only technology basically in the world because it's so superior to everything else. And WOLED, WOLED from LG is just like ancient old tech, and it needs to die, it needs to go away, and they just which is to me just ridiculous talk. I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous. Anyone that has seen QD-OLED and WOLED, I mean, they're both OLED. So the core advantages of the pixel level dimming, the true black levels you can get, the infinite contrast, they're going to apply to both of those. In general, like I said, colors may look a little brighter and pop a bit more on the QD-OLED front. There's definitely something to be said about the screen uniformity being a little bit better on the QD-OLEDs. And then like the near black handling is also maybe a little better. People talked about like some of the banding issues are not going to be as prominent on the QD-OLEDs. There are some details there where, yes, the QD-OLED does perform better. And yes, this is how I'll say it. QD-OLED has the higher ceiling, right? It has the higher tech ceiling. It has more potential for growth than WOLED. There's an argument to be made that WOLED has, generally speaking, kind of maxed out, right? That was the case for years. It seemed like for years the LG's OLED hadn't really evolved in terms of picture quality. But the idea that, if you look at the two side by side, the idea that QD-OLED blows the WOLED away is just silly talk. Anyone with a rational mind would not say that. And most the average person that would see these things in a Best Buy or something, you're not going to see that. In fact, and I make this point, Samsung Electronics makes the QD-OLED, but they don't even care enough to really market it. They don't even market the Samsung OLEDs as QD-OLED. If you look at the Samsung OLEDs, the S90D and S95D, Samsung just calls them OLED. And in fact, Samsung still uses WRGB OLED from LG throughout their line, throughout their range. Now, their flagship, their top of the line is QD-OLED. But as you go down the line, they still make OLEDs, and they start, bringing in the WOLEDs, right? And they don't want you as a consumer to know. They don't think it's important enough for you to even distinguish between them. Think about that now. They're not trying to sell us on QD-OLED. So why should we be trying to make such a huge deal out of it, right? It doesn't make sense. Again, I think OLED in general is superior and exciting. I think that the latest and greatest WOLEDs from LG look amazing. The G4 is one of the best TVs out there with one of the best images that money can buy, period. Of course, That's a WOLED. Now, part of the issue with QD-OLED is that it's extremely limited, right? It's limited in two key areas. It's limited in terms of which brands actually manufacture TVs for it. Right now, it's pretty much Samsung and Sony. That's it. And even then, they only really are doing it at the high end. Samsung S95D, that's their flagship OLED, which is not their flagship TV. Again, Samsung considers their flagship TV to be LED, mini LED, the 8K mini LED. Same thing with Sony. Sony, their high end, the A95L, that's their flagship OLED, but they consider their flagship TV to be the Bravia 9 mini LED. Again, they're not trying to push us on this QD-OLED as being the savior, the future, whatever. No, it's a alternative that has its strengths and addresses some of the weaknesses for WOLED for sure, but it's not nearly as widespread, and it's not only limited in brands, it's also limited in size, which is a big factor for me. So QD-OLED really only exists right now today in 55 inches, 65 inches, and 77 inches today. Now, they hope, their word is they will add an 83 inch or 85 inch somewhere in that class next year. That remains to be seen. We haven't heard anything concrete. There's also some rumors that they might not. That Samsung basically isn't really investing a whole lot into QD-OLED. We'll see. But that's limited compared to WRGB OLED that's been around for much longer. It's a much more mature technology, and yes, it's used by, of course, LG, Sony, Samsung themselves. Both of them still use the Bravia 8 TV. That Sony is the brand new OLED. That's a WRGB OLED, right? But from LG. Just saying. But Sony, Samsung, LG, of course. But then you have companies like Philips with their OLED. That's a WRGB OLED. Panasonic, which just came back into the US, that's a WRGB OLED. If you go to like CES and overseas, you'll see companies like Toshiba builds an OLED, Vizio's OLED. All of these OLEDs are WRGB OLEDs, right? So WRGB OLED is the standard still. It's still out there. It still looks amazing. Gives you all the great stuff that OLED does. For the keen-eyed, true enthusiast crowd, yes, it does have some limitations, and I think people are frustrated that they haven't really evolved those and improved on those limitations because they kind of hit a wall in some cases. But those limitations aren't something that you would just notice across all content, most content available today, to be honest. 98% of the time, if you look at a QD-OLED and a WRGB OLED, with real world content today, they're going to look pretty much the same. And that was basically the consensus, by the way, at the Value Electronics Shootout this year. Yes, the Sony A95L QD-OLED won for 2 years in a row. Congratulations. Samsung came in second with their QD-OLED. Congratulations. And then LG's G4 flagship WRGB OLED came in third. But the underlying thing there that everyone said that was there was that the TVs looked so close that they had to find content and find test cases specifically to try to stress the TVs to differentiate them and to highlight the differences, because just off the bat they looked extremely close. So everyone want to run into that, and oh my god, QD-OLED, this and that. I've seen QD-OLED. I've seen all the TVs. Again, the WRGB OLEDs still look amazing. Now, the flagship WRGB OLEDs use something that's called MLA, which is micro lens array, which is kind of an enhancement, so to speak, for WRGB OLED to make them even brighter. But really what it does is pushes the white brightness mostly, which has an effect on some of the other colors as well. But in general, that actually makes like the G4 OLED is brighter than any QD OLED out there technically in real world content. Are they more competitive than QD-OLED? Absolutely. Do they look amazing? Absolutely. Right? Now, they do have some downsides, and we'll get into that soon. But, when I think about the, OLED versus LED, it's clearly OLED. Which type of OLED, to me, it's really just not a big deal either way. I mean, if you wanted to say the absolute best quality money can buy today, sure, QD-OLED would be the one. Absolutely. Because it's still OLED and it does improve upon several limitations, let's say, of WRGB OLED for sure. But in real world practice, I still would be perfectly happy with a WRGB OLED, is my point. And the differences are small enough that, to me, they're close. They're just close enough. Like, it's OLED, right? Like, the overall advantage to OLED went out, and the differentiations between the two types of OLEDs, not as big of a deal. That's how I look at it. All right, so that's my take there. Now, best TV in the world, best image quality, OLED. Overall best image quality, ideally QD-OLED, right? QD-OLED is limited in size, so going to the second point of size, the biggest TVs that you can get, generally speaking, across the board are the 9800-inch class TVs. There are a couple of exceptions to that, really just two exceptions to that right now. And then, of course, projectors. I think TVs will be, again, overall have a better image quality. They're better value, apples to apples, easier to integrate into more spaces, that kind of thing. The only exception to this is micro LED in terms of image quality. You can make an argument that micro LED, has some advantages and can win out over even some of the OLEDs. Micro LED is just not even at all practical. Apples to apples, even if you want to get like a slightly, even an 89-inch micro LED right now from Samsung is over $100,000 at retail. I'm not even joking, right? So I'm not even counting that. I mean, I said money no object. Even if you want to include micro LED, I mean, there's some limitations in terms of how to integrate that. I talked about projectors being difficult. Micro LEDs are definitely way more difficult than a typical TV would be. And they're just so brand new. They're just unproven tech at this point. And the raw specs aren't really that much better than most OLEDs and mini LEDs in the market today, to be quite honest. I mean, they kind of combine the advantages of both mini LED and OLED, but they're not necessarily brighter than the brightest mini LED mini LED TVs, sorry. Right? They don't have better contrast than, the best OLEDs. It's like, for way out there, we're talking like, again, 6-figure pricing. It's like, what are you paying for? Now, they're like projectors, right? They can get really, really large sizes. Theoretically, you can go up to like 114 inches for $150,000, right? 100-inch micro LED is $130,000. Let's not even really talk about that. But that's the only thing that would come close to the image quality. It definitely would overall be better than micro LED or mini LED. Sorry. So, made the points there, right? If you put all of that together, size, image quality, and feature set, what TV would that be? Well, the answer is simple. To me, the answer is the LG 97-inch G4 TV, right? And the 97-inch G4 TV checks off all of the boxes. The G4 is one of the best TVs on the market, period. I don't think anyone would refute that. Image quality-wise, it's one of the best images you can get, for sure. And I already said that. There are obviously some differences, some things to be said about the Samsung S95D and the Sony A95L, but G4, one of the best TVs on the market for sure. Feature-wise, it has everything. It's one of the best gaming TVs out there. Input lag is one of the lowest, among the lowest. 4 HDMI ports, which is still not a standard, is still rare. Most TVs only have 2. This has 4. 144 Hz support for gaming. Dolby Vision support, Dolby Vision Filmmaker mode even in there. It just has pretty much everything feature-wise, right, that you can get in a TV today. It has all that covered. Now, this TV is unique because it literally is one of a kind. This is the only ultra large, meaning larger than 83, 85 inches. This is the only OLED at this size. So in this 100-inch class, it's listed at 97. It really is actually like a 97.5 inch, whatever. But 100-inch class. It's the only OLED in existence there. So the best combination of all of what I said before. Features, one of the best TVs, one of the most feature-packed TVs out there. Size, 100 inches is still generally the largest that you can practically get in most cases. In OLED. This is it. This is the only option for that, right? I think it's the best combination of everything. Now, TCL, like I said, has a 115-inch TV. If you for the same price, actually, all three of those TVs are the same price. The problem with the G4 97-inch, of course, is, and I kind of said it to get rid of price for this exercise, but in reality, price is there, and it is $20,000. It actually is less. It went down, right? It actually, the G2 97-inch was $25,000, right? But what are you comparing that to? Again, to get a projector with image quality at that level, you're going to be paying more than that, right? Or at least around that. You're going to be looking at something in the $30,000 to $50,000 range before you start really getting to a level of brightness and overall image quality and contrast. That's what you're paying for. And then for mini LED, the absolute best, quote unquote, best mini LEDs you can get out there in the world today. TCL has their 115-inch. Numbers are crazy. 5,000 nits, 20,000 dimming zones, all that kind of good stuff. That's $20,000, right? It's the same price, but you get a lot more size with that. 115 inches versus the 97 inches, right? The Hisense also has their UX, the Hisense 110 UX, which I strongly consider as being, getting that crown. And the specs on that even go beyond the TCL. 40,000 dimming zones, 10,000 nits of peak brightness, and all of this stuff. But it's still mini LED. And when you look at it, it still doesn't have the contrast, the 3D pop that OLEDs have, and especially OLEDs like the G4, which is a flagship level OLED. Everyone has said that. You can look at the reviews. Those TVs are out there. They're great, but they're still mini LEDs, right? And they still have those limitations. And Hisense and TCL aren't, going to be the best for processing and, just accuracy. They're not going to do that. They want to just throw in these high numbers and say like, these are the best, image quality things you can get for. They're just the showy TVs, right? Like, here, bam, hit you with these brightness, whatever. But if you really are caring about details, precision, accuracy, with your TV watching, they're not the best for sure. I think that much is enough to be said. But they're going to give you some crazy pop. They're going to be arguably the most impressive because between the size and brightness, those two would do it for sure. And if you have the money, you definitely couldn't go wrong with either one of those. They're amazing TVs, right? I'm not saying otherwise, right? If size wasn't the biggest factor for you, or if, let's say, 77 inches was the biggest TV you could fit in your space that you're looking for, you can't go wrong. Arguably the best option would be the Sony A95L 77-inch QD-OLED, or maybe the Samsung S95D QD-OLED, right? But when you put it all together, size getting bigger than that, there's nothing else like the G4, the 97-inch G4. There's no other option for it. So that's my breakdown. That's my take. I think that, it's a special TV. I haven't seen that TV in person. It's just coming out now, today. So hopefully I will be able to see it soon. But, if you have it around you, check it out. Let me know what your thoughts are. Best TV in the world to you. What's the breakdown for you look like? What's your use cases that you typically look at? Mini LED, OLED, let me know all of that. There's a lot of discussion here. But for me, you can't do better than an ultra large OLED, especially a flagship OLED from LG. That's my thoughts for now. Shoot Techno Gamer. Till next one, signing off.